All right, today we're going to be tackling lesson 5-2, solving inequalities using multiplication and division. Much like we did in 5.1, we're not doing equations. We're going to be using less than, greater than, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. So let's turn to page 292, get out our notebook so we can do some practice problems, and let's get started. Okay, just for a quick review, let's do what we talked about back in the last video here. Remember, we did things where we had h minus 26 is less than 4. And then to solve, we just did the inverse operation. I don't like that much at all. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to switch. There we go. This one should be better. Sorry about that. Plus 26 plus 26. That cancels out. We had h is less than 30. And then if you remember, we learned how to graph. Okay. And we learned where to put our circle and whether or not to leave it open or closed. In this case, we leave it open because it's not or equal to. And h is less than 30. And so our arrow is going to point to all the numbers that are less than 30. We're kind of expanding on that today in that we're going to be using multiplication and division to solve these inequalities. All right, so unfortunately, the first problem that we have to tackle today is a word problem, and I know they're not our favorites, but with practice and perseverance, we can make it through and we can become good at them. So this is at the top of page 293. If you want to look in your books, this is where I'm getting this question from. The top of page 293. Here's the problem. It reads like this. Of the students surveyed at a school, fewer than 84 said they had ever bought anything online. This is about 1/8 of the students surveyed. How many students were surveyed? So there's a lot going on here. And I think the reason why word problems can be so annoying and so troublesome is that they throw a lot of information at you all at once. And so a good strategy when we're doing these word problems is to slow down and to really just take it piece by piece. Look for important information and then to try to set up our problem from the information that we get from the words. So the first thing that I like to do is I just want to figure out what is the question that's being asked. With a lot of words in that paragraph, what are they really asking me to do? And I see the very last part is how many students were surveyed? That's the question that we're trying to answer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a variable for how many students were surveyed. We don't know how many there are. That's why they're asking us to find it. And so I'm going to use what the book uses, and they use n to represent the number of students that were surveyed. That's what we're going to solve for. Okay? N equals the number of students surveyed. Now I'm going to go through that one more time, and I'm going to try to pick out numbers, words, clues that will help me solve this word problem. So let's read through it one more time. Of the students surveyed at a school. Okay, that first sentence, there's no numbers, there's no keywords in there that will help me solve that. So I don't need anything in there. Fewer than 84 said they had ever bought anything online. If you look at that, fewer than is kind of what we've been talking about. So that's important. I'm going to circle that. 84 is a number that I could possibly use. Said that they had ever bought anything online. This is about 1/8 of the students surveyed. So I just went through, and first I found out what question that I wanted, well, what I needed to answer, which was how many students were surveyed. Then I reread it, and I just tried to pick out the important information. In red, the words fewer than give me a clue. In blue, 84 is a number that I'm probably going to have to use. And in green, 1/8 of the students surveyed. So now it comes to just putting the problem together in a way that I could solve for n. So I'm going to go back up here to the fewer than 84. I know this is long, okay? I know this is a lot. Stick with me. We can do it. Okay? Fewer than 84. To me, fewer than is going to be like that. Fewer than is the same as less than. Fewer than equals less than. Make sense? The same meaning, just different words. So fewer than 84. Now I have to decide, where does that 84 go? Is it going to go on the left side over here? Or is it going to go on the right side over here? This is why you go slow, because you need to set up your problem correctly. Otherwise, you'll get the question wrong. Okay? We want fewer than 84. So whatever we get, it has to be fewer or less than 84. With that in mind, I'm going to place the 84 on this side, on the right side. That means anything over here is going to be fewer than 84. But what's going to be fewer than 84? Well, let's go back and read the problem. If we look up here, we have 1/8 of the students surveyed. Well, I could start with 1/8. I know how to write 1/8, and so do you. It's 1/8. That's 1/8. Now, the only thing that I have to do is figure out what am I using 1/8 with, because 1/8 by itself isn't going to give me the number of students that were surveyed. So when we read the problem, you'll notice that it said 1/8 of the students surveyed. Remember at the beginning of the problem when we assigned this a variable n, and it was the number of students that were surveyed? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these two together. 1/8 of the students surveyed, I'm going to put 1/8 times n. And here's my inequality. 1/8 times n has to be fewer than 84. Let me rewrite this in a better way so it's more readable, I guess. Well, that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, but that's okay. We'll just work with it. So we have 1/8 times n. Here's our inequality. Now the next thing that we have to do is we just have to solve. Remember when we were doing equations, to do the inverse, we just have to, the inverse of multiplication right here would be division. So we have to divide by 1/8. But remember, when we divide by a fraction, it's the same as when we turn it upside down and we multiply. So we get 8/1. This all cancels out. We're just left with n. But remember, we must multiply the other side by 8/1. Okay? So I get 84 times 8, and that's going to be 672/1. So n has to be less than 672/1. Now, if you take your time, you can get 100% on all your assignments and on your test by checking your answer. So let's say we had 672, and let's check it. Let's plug it back in up here to our original inequality. 1/8 times 672 equals, okay, 84. And I just plugged that back in to what we first started with. If you remember, 1/8 times n is less than 84. That's what we solved for. And all I did is I took my answer and I plugged it in. Okay? When you solve for this, 1 over 8 times 672, if you put that into a calculator, or if you did 678, I'm sorry, 672 divided by 8, you would get 84. If you don't believe me, let's work it out. 672 divided by 8. 8 goes into 67 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract that. 67 minus 64 is 3. Bring down the 2. 8 goes into 32 4 times, and we get 84. So 84 equals 84. And that would give us a pretty good indication that we would know that we were right. We could also check the direction and make sure that our answer made sense by choosing a number less than 672. Because remember from last lesson, n has to be less than 672. So let's choose a number that's less than 672, plug it into here, right there, and let's see if we get a number that's less than 84. So I'm going to choose 0 because 0 is really easy and it's less than 672. Here's my check. 1/8 times 0 is less than 84. Again, all I've done is I've taken this inequality, moved it over here, and chosen a number for n that's less than 672. 0 is less than 672. Now let's solve. We got ourselves a pretty simple multiplication problem. Okay? 0 times 1/8 is 0, and 0 is in fact less than 84. That is true. So we know that we've done this right. This is a 10-minute slide. I know you guys are probably falling asleep through this explanation. I wanted to try to go slow and make sure that we understood this. This is a lot, okay? But I want you guys to be able to do this and to understand this. So don't be afraid to try it, make mistakes, go back and rewatch this. Let's try guided practice number 1 on biology on page 293. You're going to try that on your own. Set it up, okay? Do your best. And then unpause this when you think you're ready and you want to give it a go. Okay, so here's that guided practice number 1. And I apologize for my handwriting. I don't have the greatest handwriting. I never won any awards for it, but hopefully it's legible. The problem reads, Mount Kinabalu, or however it's pronounced, in Malaysia, has the greatest concentration of wild orchids on Earth. It contains more than 750 species, or about 1/4 of all orchid species in Malaysia. How many orchid species are there in Malaysia? All right, hopefully you tackled this problem the same way that we did the example. First thing that I would do is I would go through and find out what are you asked to find. And the question is the very last sentence right here. How many orchid species are there in Malaysia? What I would have done is I would have assigned a variable to that. And I would have used x. X equals the number of orchid species in Malaysia. Okay, and you could have chose another variable. I wouldn't have chose O for orchid because you could get that confused with 0. Okay, so I would have chose X. Next thing I would have done is I would have went through and I would have looked for numbers or information that was important that would help me solve the problem. And so when I go through that, I read the first sentence. Mount Kinabalu in Malaysia has the greatest concentration of wild orchids on Earth? To be honest, that's just filler. That's a nice little fact. There's no numbers, there's no words in there that are going to help us solve this problem. So I'm going to get rid of that because there's not much there for me to use. The next sentence is where the juice starts to come. It contains more than, that's important, 750 species, or about 1/4 of all orchid species in Malaysia. So there's my problem. That's what I have. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and I'm going to try to set up an inequality that will give me how many orchid species are in Malaysia. So let's begin setting up what we have. First of all, I know that I have the words more than right here. And I know that more than or I should know by now, that more than corresponds to this sign right here. It has to be more than 750. So I'm going to put 750 on this side because whatever is on this side has to be more than 750. Now I got to figure out what to put on that left side of that inequality sign. It contains more than 750 species, or about 1/4 the number of all orchid species in Malaysia. Remember at the beginning of the problem when I assigned X to be the number of orchid species in Malaysia? What I'm going to do then is I'm going to let that be X, and I'm going to put that here. And there's my inequality that I need to solve. So I'm going to shrink that down. I'm going to move it over here so I can work with it. 1/4 times X is greater than 750. And now what I have to do is I have to solve. Remember that when we have a fraction, like we do here, 1/4 times X, we solve by dividing. But when it's a fraction, we, say it with me, turn it upside down, and we multiply, don't we? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cancel out everything on this side. That leaves me just with X is greater than. Now I have 750 times 4. So I need to figure out what 750 times 4 is. I'll do it the old school way here. You have 0, 0, carry the 2. 7 times 4 is 28, plus 2 is 30. So X has to be bigger than 3,000. There's more than 3,000 number of orchid species in Malaysia. Now remember, we could go through and we could test this if we wanted to. How could we test it? No. Remember our original equation over here? Okay. Let's go ahead and take 3,000, plug it in for X, and see if 3,000 times 1/4 is equal to 750. So I'm going to do 1/4 times 3,000 is equal to 750. Well, if you look up here, 4 times 1 is going to give you 4 on the bottom. 3,000 times 1 is going to give you 3,000 on top. And that's going to come out to 3,000 divided by 4 equals 750. Now you just need to do a good old-fashioned division problem. 3,000 divided by 4. 4 goes into 30. 7 times 4 is 28. Subtract that. You have 2. Bring down your 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Subtract that, you get 0. Again, that 4 goes into 0. 0 times, look at that. 750 equals 750. So we know that we're right where we need to be, and we go back up to our answer. There are more than 3,000 species of orchids, and that would be your answer. Right there. Okay. The good news is that they redid the hard stuff first. The bad news is we still have some more that we need to cover. I need to make you aware of a rule that we need to be aware of now. And here's the rule that you should probably write down, memorize, and know. And I'll write it so that way you could write it as I write it. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, okay, always flip the inequality sign. Okay? Give you a moment to write that down. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, always flip the inequality sign. Notice, I did not say when you add or subtract by a negative number. Only when you multiply and divide by a negative number do you flip the inequality sign. Let's see that in practice. Let's do an easy one, that we had a negative 4 times x is greater than 8. And we need to solve for that. To solve, we're going to do division. We're going to divide by negative 4 and divide by negative 4. Okay? This cancels out. We're left with x. And we have 8 divided by negative 4, which gives me what? A negative 2. And let's pretend that I didn't switch the sign. Okay? You'll notice here that I kept the sign the same. Here's the problem. Here's my solution. You could see that I divided by a negative number, but I didn't follow the rule of flipping the inequality sign. It's the same. Here's what's going to happen. Our answer is telling us that x has to be bigger than negative 2. So any number bigger than 2. What's a number bigger than 2? Think of one. Choose one for yourself. Don't care what it is, it doesn't matter. You try this with me, okay? I'm going to choose x. Or I'm going to choose 0. Because 0 is bigger than negative 2. And I want you to take your number and I want you to plug it in up here to our original problem. Negative 4x is greater than 8. Okay? So we have negative 4, and then my x is going to be 0 is greater than 8. Now let's solve this and you'll see what happens. Negative 4 times 0 is 0. And you have 0 is greater than 8. Is that true? Of course not. Okay? This is wrong. 0 is not greater than 8. Why did we get the wrong answer? Because we didn't flip the sign. You would have got that with your number too if you chose 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, whatever you chose. You would have got this and it wouldn't have been correct. So let's try it this time doing it the right way. Okay, I have, sorry, everything's getting mixed up on me here. Okay, I have negative 4 times x is greater than 8. To solve this, I'm going to divide by negative 4, divide by negative 4. That cancels out. And because I divided by a negative number, I'm going to flip the inequality sign, just like my rule up here says to do. Always flip the inequality sign whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number. I've divided by a negative number. You can see that right here. So what I need to do is I need to change this greater than sign into a less than sign. Okay, do you see what I've done? I've taken this greater than sign and switched it to a less than sign. Now I solve. 8 divided by a negative 4 is still a negative 2. But notice how my answer this time is x has to be less than negative 2. So let's check our answer by picking a number that's less than negative 2. You could choose your number. I don't care what it is. It just has to be smaller than negative 2. For me, I'm going to let x be negative 5 because that's less than negative 2. And I'm going to plug that in. Negative 4, I'm going to plug it into my x times negative 5 is greater than 8. Negative 4 times negative 5 is 20 because a negative times a negative is a positive. And 20 is larger than 8. Is that true? It is. Okay, again, if you take the time to check your answers, you can get 100% on not only your assignments, but on your test. So I'm going to encourage you, don't be in a hurry. This isn't a race, okay? Slow down, check your answers. Let's try some examples. On the bottom of page 293, let's look at example number 2, and let's keep our rule that we just learned in mind. We have a negative 3 over 7 times r is less than 21. And I need to solve for r. Okay, so let's tackle this thing as we go here. Move this over here to give us a little bit more room. And what I need to do is I need to flip this right here to multiply it to get it to the other side, right? Because we have to divide by a fraction. Oops, my fault. We have to divide by a fraction. But we know that that doesn't work very well. And so the way that we do it is we're going to multiply and we're going to flip it. Okay? So we're going to cross that out, cross that out, cross that out, cross that out. All I'm left with then is r is less than. And then over on the other side, I'm going to have 21 times a negative 7 over 3. And you can see that I've already made a mistake, haven't I? Look at what my sign did. I had to multiply by a negative, didn't I? But I kept the sign the same. And so what I need to do is I need to go back and I need to make sure that I flip my sign. So now I flipped it. Now I'm good. So let's go ahead and let's solve for what we have here. 21 times the negative 7. I'm not sure what 21 times 7 is, so I'm going to work that out over here. 147. So 21 times a negative 7 is a negative 147. Then on the bottom, right here, I have a 3 times 1, which would give me 3. So I have a negative 147 divided by 3. I'm going to put that over here, and let's work that out. 3 goes into 14. How many times? 4, right? 4 times 3 is 12. I get 14 minus 12 is 2. Carry down the 7. 3 goes into 27. 9 times, there's my answer. So R has to be greater than a negative 49. Let's not get in a hurry. Let's check our answer here. Remember at the beginning, we had a negative 3 over 7 times R is less than 21. And over here in our answer, right there, we have that R has to be greater than negative 49. So let's choose a number for R that's going to be bigger than negative 49. You choose a number and I'll choose mine. I'm going to choose that R equals 0 because R is, or 0 is bigger than negative 49. So I'm going to plug that in for R. Negative 3 over 7 times 0 is smaller than 21. Negative 3 over 7 times 0 is 0, and 0 is smaller than 21. Is that statement true? Yes, it is. So that means that our answer up here is most likely correct. Again, another long explanation, okay? But you can do it. I'm going to give you a few examples that you could try on your own to solve. This is 2a at the bottom of page 293. You have n over 6 is less than or equal to 8, and then you have the negative. And let's do 2b. 2b is 4 over 3p with the negative is greater than 10. So here's where you're going to pause your video. You're going to work this out on your own. You're going to see what answers you come up with, and we'll see if they match mine. Go ahead and pause it here. Okay, let's see how you did. For the first one, 2a, we have n over 6 negative is less than or equal to 8. The first thing that I need to do is I need to put a place for the n, or for the negative sign. Excuse me. It doesn't matter where you put the negative. You can either put it on the top with the n, or you can put it on the bottom with the 6. I'm going to choose to put it on the bottom with the 6. So it looks like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve. Okay. How do we get rid of a negative 6 on the bottom? If it's n divided by 6, negative 6, then that must mean we have to multiply both sides by negative 6. So that way this cancels out. I'm going to write my n, and here's where hopefully you remembered the rule. What was the rule? When you multiply or divide by a negative, you must flip the inequality sign. So here I multiplied by a negative 6, so I must remember to flip the inequality sign. 8 times the negative 6 is a negative 48. So I have n has to be bigger than a negative 48. I'm going to take the time to check my answer here. And if n has to be greater than negative 48, choose a number that's bigger than negative 48. I'm going to choose that n equals 0 because 0 is bigger than negative 48. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to plug that in to our original equation up here. So 0 divided by negative 6 has to be less than 8. Well, 0 divided by negative 6 is just 0. And I get 0 is less than or equal to 8. That statement is true. And so I know that my answer up here is most likely correct. N is greater than or equal to negative 48. Let's shift our attention quickly over to 2b. Okay. I'm going to assign, doesn't matter where you put the negative, I guess. I'll put it on the bottom here. It doesn't matter. So we have 4 over negative 3 times p is greater than 10. To solve for this, I have to multiply both sides by the reciprocal because I'm not going to divide by a fraction. And so I'm going to do 4 times the negative 3p greater than 10. And then I'm going to multiply and turn it upside down. Okay? I'm going to multiply this side by a negative 3 over 4. This all cancels out and leaves me with just p. Now remember, if we look over here, we've multiplied by a negative 3 over 4. See the negative? So what I'll need to do is I need to flip this inequality sign that's right here. And I want to do that first so that way I don't forget. This says greater than, so I'm going to change it to less than. And now let's continue working our problem. 10 times the negative 3 is negative 30. 1 times 4 is 4. So I have a negative 30 over 4. Okay, 30 cannot be divided by 4. So what I would do is I would just turn this back into a mixed number. Okay, so how many times does 4 go into 30? 7 times, and that's negative because the negative on the top, on the 30 right here, this negative needs to be brought down here. So 4 goes into 30 7 times with 2 out of 4 left over. And then you can simplify that 2 over 4 to be 1/2. And that right there should be your answer. All right, let's run through one more example and then let's wrap this up, okay? On page 294, at the bottom of the page, we're going to do example number 3. And we have, oops, my fault, wrong tool. We have 60t is greater than 8. And so now to solve this, all we have to do is we just have to divide by 60. Divide by 60 and divide by 60. Cancel that out. We have t is greater than 8 over 60. And we have a fraction. What I'd like you to do is just make sure that this fraction is in simplest form. And to get this in simplest form, you can divide both of these by 4. Okay. So your final answer would be 8 divided by 4 is 2. 60 divided by 4 is 15. So t is greater than 2/15. Notice how I did not flip my inequality sign. It stayed the same all the way through. Why did it stay the same? Because I never divided by a negative number. I divided by 60, but 60 was positive. Okay, one more example. Let's do negative 7d is less than or equal to 147. Okay, to solve for this, I'm going to divide by negative 7, divide by negative 7, and here where that comes in, where we need to switch the inequality sign, because you've noticed, hopefully by now, that we divided by a negative number. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch that sign and make it greater than or equal to. And now I have to do 147 divided by negative 7, which is going to be a negative, because a positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative. So let's run through and do 147 divided by 7. 7 goes into 14 2 times. 7 times 2 gives me 14. Put a 0, bring down the 7. 7 goes into 7 one time. And so my answer is D has to be greater than or equal to a negative 21. Okay. Let's try just a couple of examples for you. At the bottom, 3a, you're going to do 8p is less than 58. And let's do 3b, which is a negative 42, is greater than 6r. So pause this video here and work these two out for yourself. Okay, let's see how you did. I'm going to divide by 8, divide by 8. What I get is P is less than 58 divided by 8. Notice how I did not flip my sign because I didn't divide by a negative number. But now I just want to put this back into a mixed number. And you might be asking, how do I know if it's a mixed number if I simplify? It's a mixed number if your numerator is larger than your denominator, which in this case, our numerator is larger than our denominator. Okay, so I'm going to figure this thing out. If you don't know how to do it in your head, then just do a division problem. 58 divided by 8. How many times does 8 go into 58? Goes in 7 times. 8 times 7 is 56. You subtract, you get 2. And so your answer would be P is less than 7 and 2 over 8. And then you can simplify the 2 over 8 and get 7 is less than 1/4. Okay. If you stopped up here at one of these two, either right here or right here, just make sure that you go the whole way. Make sure that your answer is in the proper form. It's going to be expected of you as you move to higher grades and you get into college that you know how to put your answers in the correct way. All right, let's try 3b. As I take a look at it, I have negative 42 is greater than 6r. And so to solve, I'm going to divide it by 6, divide by 6. That cancels out. I am not going to switch my sign because I did not divide by a negative. I'm going to keep it the same. And then I get negative 42 divided by 6. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, and 42 divided by 6 is 7. The only thing I don't like about this answer is that my variable is on the right. So I'm going to rewrite it so that way it's on the left. And I'm going to do r is less than negative 7. You just want to make a note that whatever which way the sign was pointing, that it's still pointing. And up here, it was pointing to the r. So when I rewrite it and I flip it, I want it to be pointing to the r. Okay, so I think that's about it. That's a lot. We've covered a bunch, and I know it was lengthy. I know these videos are long and kind of cumbersome, and it's hard to pay attention. And I'm sorry for my voice once again that I sound like I'm under the weather. It's because I am. Okay, for homework, let's look at page 295. And I know that you want 1 through 2 evens or something like that. But that's silly. Okay. You should be demanding more work because your parents are paying for it. And so we are going to do 10 through 29. Yes, all. You'll be okay. You can manage. Hey, good luck. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. If you have questions, you can ask. Good luck on your homework. If you need help, rewatch the video or just rewind to the parts that you need help on. All right, until next time. See you later.